Question to the Taoiseach and Minister for Foreign Affairs and Trade. Priority question number 1 is in the name of Deputy Brendan Smith. So I call on the Taoiseach.
Lascan Corla, in recent weeks we have seen widespread street violence in Belfast and elsewhere in Northern Ireland. We have seen attacks on the police service of Northern Ireland, including the attempted murder of police officers and widespread attempts to intimidate public representatives and their families. I have condemned these events unreservedly. I have remained in contact with the Secretary of State, Theresa Villiers, and with the party leaders in Northern Ireland throughout. Over the past week, I have spoken with Peter Robinson, Martin McGuinness, David Ford, Mike Nesbitt and Alistair MacDonald. I will be travelling to Belfast tomorrow morning to meet with the Secretary of State and the First Minister and Deputy First Minister. Officials from my department continue to work closely with the British Government and with political representatives in Northern Ireland to identify ways to address not just the current crisis but its underlying causes. Security cooperation between the Gardaí and the PSNI is at its most effective level ever. The PSNI are on the front line dealing with the violence of recent weeks. 99 police officers have been injured to date, and I want to reiterate my steadfast support for them in dealing with these most difficult circumstances. I also wish to take this opportunity to put on record the Government's abhorrence at the attempts on the lives of police officers. The vast majority of people in Northern Ireland want to see an end to street violence. The rioters are, in effect, wrecking their own communities. This year has the potential to be a great year for tourism to Northern Ireland. That potential must not be jeopardised by the recent terrible images from Belfast that have been beamed around the world by international media. The economic cost of recent events is becoming apparent. Apart from the cost of the policing operation, estimated at £7 million, foreign direct investment, the retail trade and tourism are all at risk. The Confederation of British Industry Director in Northern Ireland has warned of the economic damages being inflicted on local businesses, tourism and investment. It is my hope that out of this setback, we will see a redoubling of efforts to achieve a genuinely reconciled society in Northern Ireland. It is a reminder to all that the peace process is exactly that, a process which still has some way to go. Political cooperation and security cooperation on this island has never been better, and we can rely on these relationships of trust and on the resilience of the Good Friday Agreement to create space for progress beyond the current difficulties.
And thank you, Lascan Corner, and thank the Taoiseach for his reply. And the Taoiseach quite rightly refers to the unacceptable street violence once again in Belfast and elsewhere in Northern Ireland, the attempts on the lives of police officers, all totally unacceptable, reprehensible, and issues that we thought had been firmly dealt with. I think the last 40 days in Belfast demonstrate very clearly the need for the government, for both governments, to continue to take an active interest in nurturing and developing the peace process. The last day here, a question time and on an adjournment debate as well, we spoke with the need for constant vigilance in ensuring that we continue to nurture the peace process.
Question, please.
And can I just say to the Taoiseach, I welcome the fact that he has been in constant contact with the Northern Ireland Executive at First Minister and Deputy First Minister level, and also with the other party leaders. And I think the Taoiseach could I ask the Taoiseach if he would ensure that the message is given to the First Minister and the Deputy First Minister that politics has to be seen to work. It's not about emblems, it's not about street violence, it's about improving the lives of the people in Northern Ireland. And I think we must bear in mind the comment that I heard at the SDLP conference from the SDLP leader back in November, when he described the executive as a stagnation of a complacent, paralysed executive at Stormont that is not, unfortunately, delivering for the people in the area for which it has executive responsibility.
Thank you,
and I think it's very important that that message is given clearly to political leaders in Northern Ireland.
Come on, Taoiseach, I'll come back to the Taoiseach.
Yes, well, it is very important that politics works and is seen to work. And therefore, I think it is important that all of the political parties in Northern Ireland and all of the political leaders in Northern Ireland work closely together to, first of all, communicate a very clear message that the kinds of street violence that we've seen over recent weeks should not continue, and that it is damaging and that it is unrepresentative of the people of Northern Ireland. I would also have to say that we have been working very closely with the Northern Ireland Executive over the past couple of years. I referred earlier today to in the order of 50 ministerial meetings that have been held in the framework of the North-South Ministerial Council. These are meetings that deal with practical issues. They deal with issues like transport and roads and education and health service and a range of issues. I have remained in close contact with both the First Minister and Deputy First Minister, and also indeed the Minister for Justice, David Ford. My colleague Alan Shatter, Minister for Justice and Equality, is also in regular contact with David Ford, and I have maintained close contact with the Secretary of State for Northern Ireland, now Theresa Villiers, and before that Owen Patterson. At our meeting tomorrow, the purpose of that meeting is to discuss with the First Minister and Deputy First Minister a positive way forward from the present difficulties, and also to assure the First Minister and Deputy First Minister and the Northern Ireland Executive of the support from both governments to ensure that there is a positive way forward found from the present impasse.
Thank you, Taoiseach. Very briefly.
I'd ask Cory, can I just ask on Taoiseach, if in view of the widespread disappointment by some communities, particularly in East Belfast, in regard to the lack of progress in relation to employment and education attainment in their communities, that the Lascan Cora and other members of this House myself listened to in East Belfast some weeks ago. And will you be in a position to discuss with the Northern Ireland Executive or with community groups, whoever you're in a position to meet tomorrow, any particular support that you can give to advancing bridge building projects between the two communities? Because nothing would justify the violence, but I think we have to ensure, and I presume the Taoiseach would agree with me, that the whole area of investment in education and in training and in job opportunities is particularly important in those areas that have suffered over the long term from terrible deprivation.
Thank you.
And those particular issues were clearly outlined to us by representatives of all the communities that come from a different political tradition than most of us in this House come from.
Mouth, final reply, Taoiseach.
Yes, in fact, as it is, my department provides funding through peace and reconciliation funds and through the anti-sectarianism funding for community-based projects which are aimed at building cross-community relationships in Northern Ireland. In addition to that, we also place a very high value on the funding from the International Fund for Ireland and also European Union funding, the peace funding that has been available up to now. And indeed, in our own negotiations on the EU multi-annual financial framework, one of the Irish asks, if you like, in those negotiations is for successor funding for peace building reconciliation purposes in Northern Ireland. And I'm hopeful that as the MFF is negotiated at European Union level, that we will succeed in getting European Union funding, which will help to support and to address some of the issues of disadvantage that are at the root of some of the problem in Northern Ireland.
Margaret Taoiseach, priority question number 2 in the name of Deputy Sean Crowe. I call the Taoiseach.
In contrast to the 2009 conflict, no hard evidence has emerged to suggest that Israel used non-conventional weapons in Gaza in November 2012. While claims of this kind have been made, there have been no statements by UN organisations or reputable NGOs on the ground alleging the use of non-conventional weapons. Nor have I seen any allegation to this effect from the de facto Ministry of Health in Gaza. As the Hamas authorities were one of the parties to the conflict, it would of course be desirable to have independent evidence of any such allegation. European and other diplomatic missions in the region, including those with professional military attaches, closely monitored the reports on the conflict and detected no suggestion of non-conventional weapons being used. There is therefore no basis on which to consider the international investigation which the Deputy proposes. Many observers can be shocked and misled by the dreadful injuries which modern conventional weapons are capable of inflicting. Ireland has stressed repeatedly, both internationally and directly to the Israeli authorities, that the use of conventional heavy weapons in a crowded and built-up area inherently risks serious and unacceptable harm to innocent parties, as has again turned out to be the case. The legitimate right of self-defence must be exercised in conjunction with the rights of others and the need to clearly distinguish military targets and avoid civilian casualties. It goes without saying that this should also apply to the deliberate firing of weapons by Hamas and others at civilian targets in Israel and to the sighting of weapons in civilian areas.
I know that in 2006 the European Parliament adopted a resolution which called upon the EU and its member states to work hard to ensure the scope of the protocol to Convention on Certain Unconventional Weapons is expanded in order to prevent the further use of white phosphorus shells on military and civilian targets and the use of depleted uranium warheads. Now, we do know that in the previous conflict in 2009, Amnesty did find white phosphorus wedges on residential buildings in Gaza City. There was doctors and others. Amnesty International also came out very strongly in relation to some of the weapons that were used, and there was reports of radioactivity in relation to. I'm going on the reports of some medics that have suggested that the burns that they were coming across in relation to the latest conflict, and they were saying that they weren't the usual ones that they had seen before in relation to that some of the weapons that were used, I know the Israeli used an explosive called a dime, and apparently the impact of that was new in relation to many of the burns that were coming.
Question, please.
On the basis of that, Tánaiste, are you saying that there is no demand in relation to investigate what happened during that conflict, that there's no evidence coming out of the region in relation to it? And if there was, and again, it's second-hand that we're getting this information in relation to it, but would you support the view that one, that these weapons shouldn't be used in a built-up area, but shouldn't be used at all, and the fact that there's many of these depleted uranium shells in the ground. Again, we're getting reports from hospitals saying that it's affecting children in relation to that. There's the Gulf War syndrome that they're describing, that many children are coming up with. So if the stuff is in the ground from previous stuff, it's surprising that it hasn't been used. It's welcome if it hasn't. But if there is a view in the region that there's a need for an outside investigation, would you support that?
Tánaiste.
Well, I think we have to deal with what we do know. Let me state first of all that, of course, the use of non-conventional weapons shouldn't be used at all. I think that want to make that absolutely clear. We don't have evidence that they were used, but what we do have evidence of is the very considerable damage and death that was caused by the use of conventional weapons. And Ireland was in direct contact with the Israeli authorities throughout the crisis, both through the ambassador here and through our own embassy in Tel Aviv. We repeated our concerns about civilian casualties and about the need to avoid further escalation, in particular through the possible launching of a ground campaign. We acknowledged, as is appropriate, and as we have always done, Israel's right to protect itself and its citizens from attack, but we emphasised that this right is not a blank cheque. Any actions taken must be proportionate and must clearly distinguish military targets from civilian facilities. And during the recent crisis, I made a number of public statements on this issue. I may also say that we are also in regular contact with the UN agencies on the ground, particularly UNRWA. I met with officials from UNRWA and other humanitarian agencies in last January when I visited Gaza. and I commended them for their excellent work in challenging circumstances. And I also met with the UNRWA Director General, Filippo Grandi, when he visited Ireland last November. We have a very good donor relationship with UNRWA, and we discussed with them the situation on the ground.
Thank you, Taoiseach. Deputy Hospital. Deputy Crowe.
Sorry. Again, just I'm working off the information that I'm being given in relation to it. There is some medics suggesting that, but the fact that you know, it hasn't come across your desk in relation to it, I accept, you know, what you're saying in relation to it. We do know, of course, that there is you know, there is ordinance from previous conflicts in the region in relation to it, and I did raise it with you before in relation to the head of the medical authorities in Gaza as an Irish passport holder. I think it would be useful at some stage, you know, if you're in that region, that maybe or some of our officials even just sit down and talk to him in relation to maybe some of the difficulties that there, you know, has arisen since this conflict, but also that the reports that are coming out from the previous ordinance from conflict, particularly in the border region, where they're saying that children are picking up some of this Gulf syndrome symptoms in relation to
Thank
it.
you, Deputy. Final reply, Taoiseach.
Yes, well, I am open, and my officials are open to hear at you know, any first-hand information, particularly from people who are working on the ground. And of course, quite apart from that, this is a foreign policy issue which is a priority for us as a government. I do expect that the issue of Palestine, the Israeli-Palestinian Middle East peace process, will be the subject of discussions again shortly at the European Union Foreign Affairs Council. And while the hostilities which had been taking place before the Christmas have now ceased, the situation in Gaza is very grim, largely due to the blockade, and we're going to continue our efforts to try and secure a settlement, to try and secure a way forward, and in addition to also try and ease the hugely difficult living conditions that the people of Gaza are suffering under.
Mouth. Question 3 in the name of Deputy Clare Daly. I call on the Taoiseach.
Ireland was recently elected to serve as a member of the United Nations Human Rights Council for a period of 3 years, which began in January 2013. We have long championed the vital role of the United Nations in the promotion and protection of human rights, and we will continue to do so as a member of the Human Rights Council. I am aware of the case of the individual raised by Deputy Daly, which is being monitored by officials from my department. The British authorities have confirmed that he was released under licence in 1992. The Secretary of State for Northern Ireland revoked that licence in April 2010, and the individual has, as a result, been in custody for the past 2 years and 9 months. I understand that an appeal in relation to the case will be heard by the Supreme Court in Belfast in February. As the case is the subject of an ongoing legal process, it would be inappropriate to comment further at this time.
Margaret Taoiseach. Deputy Clare Daly.
Thanks, Ceann Comhairle, and I have to say I don't really accept the Taoiseach's response. You are aware that a cross-party delegation of TDs and senators visited Marian, Cory and others in Maghaberry prior to Christmas. And I have to say what we encountered was a man who was in a very difficult situation, being incarcerated, but being incarcerated without either him or his legal team being privy to the reasons why he was incarcerated is an incredibly difficult position for anybody to be in. It's a position which is clearly a breach of somebody's human rights as laid down by the European Convention, where people have a right to liberty, subject only to lawful arrest and detention, where they have the right to be informed of the charges against them And quite clearly in this case, that is not the case. Martin Cory's case and his arrest was deemed to be unlawful, but that situation was overruled by the Secretary of State. So I'm asking again, is the Taoiseach going to use his new his new offices on the Human Rights Council to bring this issue to the forefront of these discussions? Because if you aren't, to be honest, what's the point in being on it if we can't advance human rights issues in relation to our citizens?
Well, first of all, I think we do need to be clear here that this man's case is due to be heard by the Supreme Court in Belfast very shortly, and it's not appropriate, I think, that we would have a public discussion of the merits or otherwise of that case in advance of it being heard. I am, of course, very much aware of the cases of a number of prisoners in Northern Ireland. These have been the subject of discussions already between me, the current Secretary of State, and her predecessor, and they will be the subject of discussions between us again. In relation to the UN Human Rights Council, that's an intergovernmental body which is responsible for strengthening the promotion and protection of human rights and for addressing situations of human rights violations. There are circumstances where individuals can make complaints through the mechanism of the Council, but in all of these cases, individuals are expected to exhaust the appropriate domestic remedies that are available to them before doing so.
Deputy Daly.
Briefly, Ciarán Comhairle, I think the Taoiseach is quite correct that the case is due to be heard, but we should be very clear that that case is being heard when this man has been almost incarcerated for almost 3 years now. The courts have already heard his case and decided that there wasn't a basis for his original arrest, and that was then subsequently overruled on the grounds of closed evidence. And I'd like to ask the Taoiseach again that, given, as he correctly says, this scenario affects a number of prisoners in similar situations, that the whole basis and idea of closed evidence, where somebody doesn't know and their legal team doesn't know the basis on which they're being incarcerated, is absolutely reprehensible. And I would ask you, on behalf of the delegation that made the visit to the North, you had indicated previously that you would meet us in relation to a feedback from that visit, particularly with regard to the circumstances of Marian Price, who we also met and whose actual incarceration is somewhat similar to Martin Cory. So I would ask that, I know it was difficult for logistical reasons before Christmas, we didn't have that meeting, but if we could have that at the earliest convenience to discuss the issues that flowed from that visit.
Yes, but can I say straight away that I am, of course, willing to meet with the delegation that travelled to Northern Ireland, and as Deputy Daly has acknowledged, due to logistical reasons, there was a bit of confusion over the arrangements for the meeting, and but I'm quite happy to have that meeting as quickly as it can be arranged. And indeed, I'm particularly interested to hear the assessment of the delegation which visited the prison. I just want to be clear here. There is an appeal, and I don't want to comment on that or on the legalities of the issue, and I hope that will be accepted. But I do want to say that I am concerned about the prisoner issue in Northern Ireland, and it is something that is and will be the subject of ongoing discussion between me and the Secretary of State and between our respective officials.
Ceist Carr, in the name of Deputy Brendan Smith. I call him the...
Last Ciarán Comhairle, over 3,500 people died during the Troubles. The pain that their relatives and friends continue to endure to this day is considerable. There is no hierarchy of loss or of grief for these families. They all seek the truth of what happened to their relatives, and the Finucane family are no different in this regard. The Irish government continues to seek a public inquiry into the murder of Pat Finucane, as committed to in the agreements, on the basis of the findings of Judge Cory on the likelihood of state collusion. The work undertaken by Desmond de Silva QC can facilitate this, in my opinion, by helping ensure that an inquiry need not be lengthy, open-ended and inordinately expensive. As I said at the time, we must build on the progress made thus far. In my contacts with Secretary of State Villiers following the publication, I made clear that the Irish Government will continue to seek a public inquiry. The Taoiseach has also passed this message to Prime Minister Cameron, and I will continue to work together with the Secretary of State to ensure the full implementation of all the agreements.
Margaret. Well,
I thank the Taoiseach for his reply, and as he quite rightly says, there's no hierarchy in grief and in pain for more than 3,500 families who lost loved ones, and then add to that the many thousands who have been injured as well. Could I just say that the De Silva report, it exposes very, very clearly the shocking level of brutal state collusion during the Troubles and that dark chapter in our country's history. And it's obviously clear as well that the publication of the De Silva report does not meet the fair, objective criteria of a full investigation into that murder. This House back in 2006 had an all-party motion calling for a public inquiry. The Western Park Agreement, which is an international agreement, also provided for a full public inquiry. And could I ask on Taoiseach if Secretary of State Villiers indicated that if she indicated the British Government would give further consideration to the all-party motion of this House that a full public inquiry be held, also the fact that it was part of an international agreement, and did An Taoiseach raise those particular aspects in his discussions with Secretary of State Villiers? And if I recall correctly from the last day we discussed this matter as well, An Taoiseach mentioned that he would raise this issue with Deputy Prime Minister Mr Clegg as well.
Margaret, Taoiseach.
I'll ask you, Cory, first of all, I want to say that the British Government is very much aware of the Irish Government's position on this issue. That has been communicated by the Taoiseach directly to Prime Minister Cameron, by me to Secretary of State Villiers, and on the occasions that I've had the opportunity of doing so, to Deputy Prime Minister Clegg and indeed Foreign Minister Haig. The British Government, as you know, decided not to have a public inquiry in this case, but to have the review carried out by Desmond de Silva and to publish that report. I made a statement here in the House following publication of the report. The position of the Irish Government has not changed. We continue to seek a public inquiry. I believe that the work that Desmond de Silva has done, I think would, because I know one of the concerns has been the length of time that a public inquiry would take, the cost of it, and so on. But I think the work that Desmond de Silva has done, I think, would facilitate the holding of a public inquiry, because a lot of examination of evidence has been done, and therefore it shouldn't be one that is protracted. There is an agreement, the Western Park Agreement, which committed to the holding of a public inquiry. Indeed, we've been required under that agreement to have an inquiry of our own, which is the Smithic inquiry that is continuing. Our view is that the full terms of the agreements should be implemented in respect of the holding of an inquiry.
Thank you, Taoiseach. Deputy Smith.
Asking Cory, could I just say to the Taoiseach as well that the Finucane family have completely rejected the report as whitewash, and indeed the Finucane family have been very dignified in all their campaign to have a full public inquiry. And could I just ask An Taoiseach again to continue to pursue this matter with the British Government in view of the fact that it's a breach of an international agreement, and the other part of the agreement that was made in Western Park was for a tribunal to be set up on this side in regard to allegations of collusion, and that the Irish Government have implemented their part of that particular agreement. And I think every opportunity needs to be followed up in every forum to ensure that the British Government change their mind in regard to this particular issue.
Thank you,
because the De Silva report clearly outlines the brutal collusion by state forces in the murder of an individual.
Well, I want to agree with Deputy Smith that the Finucane family and Geraldine Finucane in particular have pursued this issue with great determination and with great dignity. I spoke with Geraldine Finucane on the day that the report was published, and we agreed that we would meet sometime early in the new year, that I would meet with her and her family early in the new year to discuss where we go from here. So I hope to arrange that meeting in the near future, and to keep in close contact with her and her family about the issue.
Thursday. Keshtakuig in the name of Deputy Sean Crowe. I call him Thursday.
With the move to performance budgeting in 2012, the layout of the estimates has changed. All expenditure is now grouped under departmental programmes, which combine administrative and direct expenditure attributable to each area of activity. In the case of Programme C, Reconciliation and Cooperation on this island, the overall allocation for 2013 is €18.334 million, a slight increase on the allocation for 2012. Overall, the estimates for 2013, published on the 5th of December last in respect of my department, show a reduction of some €4.1 million for Vote 28, Foreign Affairs and Trade, compared with the allocation for 2012. In preparing the budget, every effort was made to protect direct expenditure and the direct programme expenditure allocations, comprising €2.7 million to support the Reconciliation and Anti-Sectarianism funds and €195,000 to support the International Fund for Ireland, remain unchanged. The particular adjustments to Programme C shown in the estimates are the result of an updated estimate of the administrative costs attributable to the programme in the light of the experience of the first year of the operation of the new performance budgeting system. As well as incorporating the overall reduction in administrative funding, there has been some minor redistribution of expenditure across the various administrative subheads. Taking these adjustments together, the revised administrative allocation has then been associated with the relevant programmes according to standard criteria. It is this process that has resulted in a slightly higher figure being assigned to Programme C for 2013. The revised estimates volume, which will be published in the coming weeks, will provide more detailed information on all expenditure. That volume will take account of the 2012 outturn and will also include a number of adjustments, often technical, that are made as part of the budgetary process.
Margaret and Shakta Sean Crowe.
Again, Thomas, I'd like to thank you for that reply. I did really want to try and find out, where, first of all, I want to welcome the fact that there's been an increase for reconciliation fund from your department in relation to it, but I would like to know, exactly where the actual money is going, what groups are availing of it, what the type of work they're doing. I think that would be useful to get that out into the public record in relation to that. I think that it's hugely important, the work, the vital work that, like some of us went up recently. Deputy Smith was talking in terms of, we went up to Belfast and we met South Belfast, North Belfast and East Belfast, and we've seen the actual work going on the ground, and many of it being funded by your department in relation to that. Hugely important work. And I suppose that for selfish reasons we all want to see that work, because at the end of the day, the work that these groups are doing is going to determine the type of society, the type of country, the type of people that we are in the future in relation. So it's hugely important to have. I suppose the flag flying thing that was mentioned earlier does create problems for many of those groups, but at the end of the day, reconciliation and equality is not about putting things on the back boiler. Rosa Parks, when she didn't one day decide, oh well, I'll sit down the back and I'll think maybe when it suits people in relation to this. So equality is very, very important to the whole work of reconciliation. It is about shared spaces. It's about people being comfortable working together, and that's part of the difficulty in relation to what's happening at the moment in relation to this flag issue. You mentioned in relation to your views in relation to, do you believe that the flag issue and this conflict that's happening on the street, how is it affecting many of those groups in relation to? Because you're talking, it seems to be isolated areas that it's actually happening in, because you talk outside of the greater Belfast area, that work is still going on. It's still going on in the Short Strand and East Belfast. It's going on in those communities. It's going on the Springfield Road, where again houses being attacked. So what extra work, what can we do? You talked earlier about, the importance of politics and race. What extra can we do as politicians to make this work, to bring that shared space, to make people feel comfortable to be involved in this process?
Taoiseach.
Well, first of all, in respect of the estimate, which is what the question is about, I think I'll be very happy. I know we have an opportunity at the Foreign Affairs Committee, or indeed Good Friday Agreement Committee, if you wish, to tease through some of the detail of this. The 2012 estimate was the first that we did this performance budgeting on. The idea basically was to reflect in what was in the estimate what the real cost of staff and all resources and so on was going to be. And to some extent that's a bit of a learning experience, and the adjustments that are in this year's estimate are, if you like, learning from, I suppose, really coming to the conclusion that we're actually doing we're doing more on the Northern Ireland side than was reflected in the 2012 estimate. That's just a technical point. In respect of the issue in Northern Ireland, I think one of the great strengths of the Good Friday Agreement was the idea of mutual respect. That you have two national identities, that there's respect for each national identity. And I think we have to, I think as we move forward, I think it's critically important that we retain that fundamental principle of that agreement. And I think we also need to understand and to be respectful of people whose identity is British. I think to be sensitive to that identity, particularly at a time of demographic change in Northern Ireland. But above all, I think it needs to be done in a way that all of the parties in Northern Ireland do that collectively. Everybody in Northern Ireland needs to feel at home and needs to feel comfortable. And I think that we need to understand and be sensitive to that. But I think where we have to draw the line is where the expression of that, or protest about that, or whatever, spills over into the kind of street violence that we've seen in recent times. And of course we have to work, as you say, on the ground in building up local communities and building cross-community relationships, and that's where the anti-sectarianism and the peace and reconciliation funding of my department comes in.
Thank you, Taoiseach. We'll go over time and we've gone to other questions. Ceiste Shea, in the name of Deputy Sandra McClellan, and I call on the Minister of State.
Thank you, Lascar. Corla. The programme for government contains a clear commitment to Ireland's aid programme and to the United Nations target of providing 0.7% of gross national product for official development assistance. We have underscored this commitment in our budgetary allocation for ODA, and we have emphasised that we are working to achieve the United Nations target when our economic circumstances allow it. Last year, the government provided €639 million for development assistance. For 2013, an estimated €623 million has been allocated. After a period of budget reductions, we have essentially stabilised the aid budget, which is a very significant achievement in current economic circumstances. The aid programme is at the heart of our foreign policy and reflects the values of the Irish people. It remains focused on the fight against global poverty and hunger, and on the poorest countries and communities in sub-Saharan Africa. In 2011, the European Union collectively provided over €53 billion in ODA, accounting for over 55% of global assistance to developing countries. The European Union and its member states have called on all international donors, including new and emerging partners, to raise their level of ambition and to increase their ODA efforts to a level similar to the EU, thus contributing their fair share to the global development efforts. EU member states are committed to making development aid more effective and to agreeing a global framework to improve the impact of development assistance on the reduction of global poverty. Ireland has been recognised internationally as a leader in making aid more effective. During our EU presidency, we will continue to work with our EU partners to emphasise the transformative role of development cooperation and to ensure maximum impact in the delivery of assistance to developing countries. I believe that we owe this to our own citizens and to those with whom we work in the developing world, especially at a time of economic challenge internationally.
Margaret Chuck the Sean Crow.
I suppose it's very difficult for many people that contribute and so on, and people get really extremely upset and annoyed in relation to when they see larger states failing to live up to their responsibilities in relation, particularly in relation to aid and development and commitments they actually made in relation to it. We know that Ireland and other countries around the EU and that are going through extremely difficult times in relation to cuts in their health and education and other areas in relation to that. And there's huge difficulties in relation to it. And I know that Irish Aid's budget was cut by 16 million in the recent budget. And I think it's been cut 5 times since 2008, 32% or something since 2008. But we also know that Irish Aid has a proven record in relation to being the best in the world in terms of value for money and overall quality, and most importantly, development aid is being how effective it is. So I suppose, Minister, what I'm asking is, we know that there has been some criticism recently from some politicians, some journalists in relation to. Do you agree that in relation to where that money should be spent at the moment? And I just wonder, do you, in relation to, would you agree, for instance, that Ireland's prosperity depends on global stability and international cooperation, and that Irish Aid is an investment in global stability and fairness and prosperity that will benefit Ireland long and short term? And what again, Minister, is your response to those handful of politicians and journalists who say that Irish Aid money should be spent nearer home, and that aid should be cut or stalled or drastically cut and invested nearer to home? Which is, the question that's out there. You've probably heard on some of the radio stations and some of the TV. But it's a huge question, and I think it needs to be responded to in this House.
And Deputy Minister Castro.
Thank you, Lescan Corley. There's quite a number of questions there, Deputy. And I'd first of all like to indicate my appreciation of your own support for my department's development assistance programme and that of your party. It has always been unstinting. Their situation is that the European Union provides 55%, 53 billion of all development aid and 55% of the global development aid. So the European Union is in fact showing the way, and 4 member states have reached and exceeded the 0.7% target. And indeed, our largest neighbour, the United Kingdom, which in 2011 was at 0.56%, is expecting to exceed the 0.7% either last year or this year. So they have made a tremendous commitment and a tremendous effort to do that. So the European Union is not being slow in dealing with this matter. We are very anxious to ensure that other countries will come into the equation in terms of their contribution. Particularly, we're very, very anxious to see emerging economies like China and like India get involved. So we want to see it global development aid, and we will certainly be pursuing that. In terms of the Irish situation, there had been, as you said, approximately 30%, slightly over 30% reduction since 2008. This government has stopped that reduction pretty much and stabilised the situation, and last year the reduction was from 639 million to 623 million, which certainly is, in the present circumstances, was quite an achievement. Irish Aid certainly is an investment in terms of what we do. We focus it on sub-Saharan Africa. We focus it on the area where there is the greatest poverty. The OECD has on a number of occasions indicated that we are at the cutting edge of the quality of aid that we provide and the effectiveness of our aid, so there is no doubt about that. But in the long term, in terms of Ireland as global citizens and where we are coming from and where we are at the present time and going forward, it is in all our interest to ensure that there is a developing economy in countries that have been slow to develop, that are emerging countries at the present time, and we have an African strategy whereby we are showing that there is an integrated progress from relief to recovery to development to economic engagement.
Thank you, Minister.
That is very much for the benefit of the African countries themselves, but also in the broad sense is benefit for Irish trade and development as well.
Deputy Donovan.
Bless you, Cory. Just following on from Deputy Crowe, and I would agree with an awful lot of what he says, but I suppose at the end of the day we have an obligation as well, Minister, to question when things may not be as they seem to be. And I suppose the concerns that have been raised recently are in relation to the €4 million that were designated for Uganda that went elsewhere within that country. And I suppose the question that I would have is, following on from that, and given the constraints economically that we have at home and the limited budget that we have at home, and we all want more done with less, are you confident that the Department's own procedures and Irish Aid's procedures are robust enough now to ensure that the same thing can't happen again? And I suppose the other point that I'd like to ask is, are we in a process that we can audit or assess Irish Aid and the delivery of the projects in the other countries as well, not just to single out Uganda, but that maybe every now and again that there's a spot check done on it, because I would agree with Deputy Crowe in terms of how we're perceived internationally, but how we're perceived at home as well as a government and as an Oireachtas is that we have to hold people to account, and when €4 million goes missing, it's no small amount of money. I think you'll appreciate, and I think we have to learn something from it.
Come out, the Minister.
Thank you very much, Deputy, for those questions. There is no doubt about it that the situation is extremely dire in a very large number of countries, particularly, as I said, in sub-Saharan Africa. There is in the region of 1 billion people who go to bed daily in hunger situation. There is a huge situation in relation to various epidemics still, and particularly the AIDS, HIV epidemic. We have a legacy ourselves of hunger from the famine time, and I think it is part and parcel of what we are and who we are, that we recognise that the best that we can possibly do for those who are so much less well off than we are ourselves, and that is the context in which our Irish aid is provided. At the same time, of course, we do have an obligation to ensure to the taxpayer, the Irish taxpayer, that the money is well spent. And I think the situation in Uganda, where 4 million went missing, is a good example of just how Ireland deals with a situation when something of this occurs. We pursue the matter immediately, and the Taoiseach directed straight away that the Director of Irish Aid would proceed to Uganda, that we would examine the situation, that we would demand that the money would be restored, that we would check out the facilities that were in place, and we discovered as well that, of course, the Controller and Auditor General who is there was somebody who had been trained by Irish aid assistants, and that it was the Ugandan Controller and Auditor General that did determine the funds that had gone missing. The fund has been restored. It was restored before Christmas, and we have indicated quite clearly that we will be looking at all of the mechanisms that are in place at the present time to ensure that something of this nature does not happen again, and that has been done at the present time. So that area shows that the Irish aid mechanisms actually fulfil the purpose that they were intended for, and we are going to make sure that this is the case in every country that we are dealing with.
Ceist Seacht, in the name of Deputy Sean Fleming, I call on the Minister of State.
Ireland has a strong international reputation for the quality and effectiveness of our aid programme, which is sharply focused on the fight against poverty and hunger, especially in the poorest countries of sub-Saharan Africa. The programme is built on the contributions of generations of Irish people who have worked in the developing countries, including volunteers, professionals and missionaries. At present, the aid programme, which is managed by Irish Aid in the Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade, is funding the work of some 1,300 development workers, volunteers and missionaries in developing countries. In addition, the Rapid Response Corps established by Irish Aid provides an opportunity for those with specific skills to be deployed swiftly in response to humanitarian crises and disasters. The programme for government includes a commitment to establish a civilian volunteer corps. In line with this commitment, following the completion of the review of the 2006 White Paper on Irish Aid, we are planning to implement a new initiative on international volunteering in developing countries. It will strengthen sport volunteering and promote civilian participation in high-quality volunteer programmes that contribute to the achievement of clear sustainable development goals. The volunteering initiative will reflect development needs in developing countries and increase volunteering opportunities for those, including job seekers and particularly retired public servants, who have skills and experience in short supply in the developing world. Irish Aid has begun discussions on the elements of the volunteering initiative with key development non-governmental organisations and United Nations agencies. I expect to present the details of the initiative in the coming months. In addition, in the context of our current EU presidency, we are now working closely with the Council, the European Commission and the European Parliament to bring forward proposed legislation for the establishment of a new European Union Aid Volunteers initiative.
That's the reply to just question 7, is it, Minister of State? Yes. Yeah. I thank the Minister of State for his response. My understanding is that the Peace Corps formula was devised by President Kennedy and Sergeant Shriver in the United States in the early 1960s, obviously, and I think it's the most notable example of a civilian voluntary corps that I'm aware of. And would I be correct in thinking, could I ask the Minister, if the US Peace Corps operates on the basis of giving placements particularly to students, maybe people out of second level, but the equivalent of our second level rather than people who had finished the third level or college education, giving them placements to work on local projects in countries where the United States wanted to make some particular messages or give or assist some particular programs. Is it on the basis of the United States model the Minister hopes to develop a particular program? And will the people whom you hope to place on the program, will they get specific training aside from their general knowledge or their general competence? And you also mentioned retired public servants. You gave the example where retired public servants with their particular competence, or people retired from the private sector either. But is your thinking at the minute more inclined to make placements available for retired personnel rather than people midway maybe through or approaching the conclusion of their formal education?
Thank you, Minister.
Well, Deputy, what we have in mind is that we would build on what is in existence at the present time, and we have voluntary service overseas and COLOV that are involved at the present time in volunteering initiatives, and of course anybody can apply and put their name forward in relation to that, whether they're students, whether they're working people or otherwise. And of course non-governmental organisations themselves are very often looking for people to volunteer as well. But what we're looking at, especially now in the context of the commitment in the programme for government for the civilian corps, is looking at how we might best harness particularly retired civil servants and others from the private sector as well. Considering the number of the 30,000 or thereabouts civil servants from right across every department that have retired in the last 2 years or so, and there's more to go in terms of the Troika programme, another 10,000 civil servants over the next 2 years or so. There are people there with enormous managerial and professional skills who are retired, and we feel that this is a potential that we should engage in, where we're talking about trainers of teachers and of health services and so on. So this is a new potential volunteering cohort that has not been available to to come on the scene before, and we're very anxious to use that to the
Thank you, Minister.
best ability that we can. So that would be particularly the thrust of the new initiative. But we're also looking at other people to get involved as well. For example, we're looking for the diaspora that is here to get involved. There's no reason why they should not go back to their own countries with some of the experience that they have here and bring that to bear in the development of their own countries as well.
Deputy Smith, briefly.
Thank you, Alaska and Cora. Could the Minister just refer again to the type of time frame he has in mind to launch his initial thoughts, to put it that way? And when would you hope to have the Peace Corps actually in operation? And apart from health and education, are there any other particular areas that you would hope to have a cohort of people to focus on and to work in those impoverished countries with local communities?
Come on, final reply, Minister.
Well, I'm looking at it from across the entire government. It's a whole government approach. There are just as many people in the Garda service, the people in the Defence Forces, people in revenue, people right across the board, and particularly in the area of agriculture, which is very relevant to impoverished countries where there's a high degree of agricultural involvement. So it's right across the board, not just health and teaching. And I'd like to see that as it operating on that basis. When it's going to happen, we've already done most of the work in relation to it, and it will be part and parcel of the new policy that we will be launching in the not too distant future. In terms of the details, will be launched at a further stage in the coming months.
Margaret Sarah. Ceiste Hucht, in the name of Deputy Timmy Dooley and Minister of State.
The 2006 White Paper on Irish Aid set out clearly the basis and priorities for Ireland's official aid programme, which is working on behalf of the Irish people to improve the lives of the world's poorest people. The programme has been recognised internationally for its focus on poverty and hunger, especially in sub-Saharan Africa, and for its leadership in making aid more effective. The review of the White Paper on Irish Aid is one of the commitments contained in the programme for government. We want to carry out such a review to examine the progress being made by our aid programme, to assess the changed context globally and here at home, and to set out our future priorities as the international community considers the framework for international development after 2015, the target date for the Millennium Development Goals. A very vibrant public consultation was undertaken for the review between February and April of last year, which was overseen by the Independent Irish Aid Expert Advisory Group. We met over 1,000 people across Ireland and in our partner countries and received a large number of written submissions. We also undertook consultation across government departments and at the various committees here in the Houses of the Oireachtas. Since then, we have embarked on a process of considering carefully the contributions made during the consultation period, as well as the available evidence on what works best. Based on this, we have finalised a new policy on Ireland's role in global development. This policy will be submitted for government approval in the near future.
Margaret there.
Thank you, Alaska and Cora. Thank the Minister of State for his reply. Just, Minister, in regard to the review, have you taken into account the programmes that are operated by other countries? Maybe, I don't know which country. Hopefully it's our own country is seen as one of best practice in regard to development programmes. And I presume other countries run very efficient and effective programmes as well. And has any of the programmes or the strands in the different programmes operated by other countries, are they being taken into account in your review? I welcome the fact that there was widespread consultation actually within our own country and elsewhere as well. And Minister, when you referred earlier to Deputy Crowe in regard to the reduction in the level of overseas development aid since 2008, you spoke of a 30% reduction. Is that 30% in the quantum of money, or is it 30% taking into account the downturn in the economy and obviously the smaller GNP and the fact that we assess the Millennium Goals and the overall targets that we hope to achieve on the basis of the percentage of GNP?
Margaret Sarah.
Thank you very much. In relation to the last point, the 30% reduction is in fact in accordance with the official targets sought and it is officially put as gross national income, which is effectively gross national product. So that is where the reduction is from. In terms of other countries, yes, we're very au fait with what's going on in other countries, and we take a lot of that into consideration. Of course, there are some differences between us and a lot of other countries. One of them is in relation to tied aid. A lot of other countries have tied aid where we have untied aid. In other words, we do not make our aid provision